Aum Gangadipataye Namaha. Namaste, and welcome to our series on Vedānta Sutra. This is the first verse, or a sutra actually, and let's just dive into it without delay. Atato brahma-jijñāsā. Now, therefore, the inquiry into Brahman. The detailed translation is, now, after the attainment of the requisite spiritual qualities, therefore, as the results obtained by sacrifices, etc., are ephemeral, whereas the result of the knowledge of Brahman is eternal, the inquiry into the real nature of Brahman, which is beset with doubts owing to the conflicting views of various schools of philosophy, should be taken up. So here we have the famous Atato brahma-jijñāsā verse. And most people will put the emphasis on brahma-jijñāsā. This is the purpose of Vedanta. This is the aim of the Vedas. This is the goal of human life. One must inquire, jijñāsā, into Brahman. Brahman will be defined in the next verse, so I'm not going to touch that now. But what is this jijñāsā? And what is the meaning of atato in the beginning? These are very significant because they will enable us to see past the objections of the purva-paksha, the one who is arguing against the views of the author. So, jijñāsā doesn't mean a verbal inquiry. So we just get all the books on Vedanta and put them in a big pile on our desk and start going through them and comparing them and like that. That's a good way to get totally confused. Jijñāsā doesn't mean an intellectual or verbal inquiry. It means an experiential quest into the nature of Brahman. Brahman is everything, including ourselves. Therefore, we should be able to find Brahman within ourselves. And this is the real nature of the quest, the real nature of the inquiry. Just like Ramana Maharshi always asks this question, who am I? We should look into who am I? But that doesn't mean that we take who am I as a mantra. Who am I, who am I, who am I? That leads nowhere because it's simply words and it will keep you stuck in the mind. And similarly, academic thrashing out of all the different views on Brahman and Vedanta is simply going to confuse you and keep you stuck on the mental platform. So it's better to choose one teacher. And who is the best teacher? Shankara. Shankaracharya is universally acclaimed as the originator of modern Vedanta. And so his inquiry or his interpretation of the Brahma-sūtras is considered the standard, the gold standard by which all others are compared. So why does he begin with atato? Now, therefore. Because this Vedanta comes as a consequence of what has gone before. Now, now that you have gone through all the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Itihasas, the 6 different realms or limbs of Vedic knowledge, the Brahmanas, the Yogas, the Puranas, Now that you have gone through all this stuff and done a significant amount of puja, a significant amount of meditation and self-inquiry, and seen how difficult it is, now that you have the prerequisites for this inquiry, let us begin the inquiry itself. So at the very outset, he says, this is not for everybody. You must have certain prerequisites, certain qualifications. And now let's look into the argument of the Purva-paksha. Because the Purva-paksha says, I don't need no stinking qualifications. I already am Brahman. And it's obvious. I exist. I am aware of my existence. Therefore, I am Brahman. I don't need this elaborate, difficult inquiry. I simply look at it's obvious, isn't it? Doesn't everybody know they exist? So this is perfectly expressed the attitude of Neo-Advaita. What is Neo-Advaita? New Age philosophy. And it has become so prevalent that for all practical purposes, the common man identifies Vedanta with the New Age philosophy. For example, the very popular movie, The Secret. And this was the point of the movie. The whole theme of the movie was that you already are Brahman. You don't need any process. You don't need any qualifications. Just recognize that fact. And start acting as God. Declare yourself to be the supreme. And you can get whatever you want. That's the hook. Get whatever you want. So this, how can I say, strange transformation of the original Vedanta into Neo-Advaita. The original Advaita teaching was very austere. It was meant for sannyasis. It was meant for people who have tremendous background, tremendous foundation in Vedic knowledge. It wasn't meant for the punters, the more or less intelligent idiots who would twist the words and ignore the purpose. So let's look into this further. How does Shankara reply to the Purva-paksha? He says, well, first of all, it's not obvious at all. It's not obvious because there are so many different schools of philosophy, and they all say something different about Brahman, and they all give a different process for attaining Brahman. And not only that, everything that you're talking about, such as fulfilling desires and so on, is temporary, material. It's not the eternal. It's not the source of everything. You cannot even create a tiny insect. So how can you declare yourself God? Actually, you are dependent, as long as you're in this world, you're dependent on higher authorities for everything. You cannot simply say that these higher authorities don't exist, or that they don't matter, or that you are not under their authority, because you are. So, first of all, before you can even approach Brahman, before you can even begin the actual process of inquiry into Brahman, you have to acquire certain qualifications. And what are they? Shankaracharya lists them very kindly for us. He says, the antecedent is neither the study of the Vedas, for it is a common prerequisite for Purva-mimamsa as well as Vedanta, nor the knowledge and performance of the rituals prescribed by the Karma-kanda, for these in no way help one who aspires after knowledge. but certain spiritual prerequisites. They are discrimination between things permanent and transient. So in other words, the New Age supposition or assumption that I am already Brahman is not true, because they're talking about the empirical self, the ego, the mind and body. So although the mind and body are nothing but Brahman, just like we talked last time about the ocean and the waves, the mind and body are like the waves and the foam on the ocean of Brahman. But that doesn't mean that we can simply say the mind and body are Brahman, because they're impermanent and Brahman is eternal. Next is renunciation of the enjoyment of fruits of action in this world and in the next. In other words, freedom or transcendence of karma. If you're no longer pursuing fruitive activities, but simply trying to cognize the supreme truth, then you're a yogi. But if you're still going after those fruits, you're a bhogi. You're an enjoyer. And because of that, you will be subject to the law of karma. That will prevent your realization of Brahman. So you have to be beyond that. Attainment of the 6 treasures, the paramitas, the most desirable things of life. And they are not allowing the mind to externalize, keeping the mind within, and checking the external instruments of the sense organs, not engaging the senses with their objects. This is in yoga too, as pratyahara. Not thinking of things of the senses means one no longer follows the vasanas or tendencies of the mind to contemplate the sense objects. Ideal forbearance, giving up anger, attachment, and so on. Constant practice to fix the mind in God. That means some form of meditation or bhakti. And faith, shraddha, faith, means unflinching trust in the reality of the divine and the reliability of the process to attain it. And finally, the intense desire to be free. One must recognize that one is bound by the law of karma, by time and space, by so many limitations, upadhis. So these conditioning factors have to be transcended to attain mukti, moksha, liberation, enlightenment, nirvana, whatever you want to call it. The state where one is fully aware of Brahman and fully cognizant of one's identity with Brahman. This is not the empirical self. This is not the mind and body at all. This is something beyond both mind and body, which already exists, which already is. It's not that we have to become something. It's not that we have to change or transform ourselves the way the New Age people talk about all the time. Transformation. But their transformation is simply alternating material qualities going around and round in a circle and never really reaching anywhere. The actual process is going to be discussed in detail in the 3rd book of Vedānta Sutra. And the results of that process are given in detail in the 4th book. And so that's what we have to look forward to once we have defined all of our terms. Om Tat Sat, Om Harihi Om.